Hello and welcome to the Homeless Consultant channel. My name is Paul B. I am the Homeless Consultant. And today, let me start out with a quote to get this ball rolling. The hottest places in hell are reserved for those who in time of great moral crisis maintain their neutrality. That's from Dante. You know, there are times when we're kind of immune to it today because we see horrors on television, and if you want to look for it on the internet and such, you can even watch some innocent person have their head sawn off by a terrorist. The media, the movies, the kind of sheer horror that we see has we can't recognize anymore when something is horrifically, horribly, terribly wrong. And occasionally you're driving down the road, or you might be involved in some horrific accident you see in front of you, and you just see something and you're just in shock. And you wonder what kind of world you live in where it's even possible to see what you just saw. And that's what just happened to me. I'm trapped out here, 4 years of living in a car. I'm trapped here because of the snow and the cold, unable to go anywhere, not able to upload this video for a couple of days. There's a break in the snow. I go out to get some food and gas, because I have to burn through half a tank of gas every day to try to stay warm in here, which doesn't really help. And so I'm getting some food to pay for gas. And I look, and there, the headline on the newspaper, the Minnesota newspaper, what it said was one of those horrific things that you see that puts you into shock, and you can't believe what you just saw. What I saw was a headline that made some sort of reference to Minnesota U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar running for President of the United States of America, the leader of the free world. My videos here document in real time, with me speaking naturally to you, not putting on a show, but speaking naturally to you. You may not like the way I speak, you may not like what I say, but it's the real deal, because that's all I've got living in this car in the state of Minnesota, whose U.S. Senator is Amy Klobuchar. And in those videos, I have repeatedly shown and demonstrated and told you the stories of how for 4 years I have tried to get anything that resembles satisfaction from any point of government in Minnesota, including the office of U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. And how I have gotten not only no help, but I don't even get a response. Whether I, the person speaking to you right now, whether I live or if I die, and am buried 6 feet underground and disappear from this world forever, that doesn't matter to these Minnesotans. That's why I'm living in this car for 4 years. Least of all does it matter if I or the other 9,999 homeless people in Minnesota live or die. That doesn't matter to Amy Klobuchar. I can already say God help me in this situation. But if someone like that becomes president of the United States, and I have said this all along through my videos, you'll see it peppered throughout my videos. The reason it is relevant to everyone out there, what I have to say about Minnesota government, is because at least two of them have significant influence over the entire country in Washington, our U.S. senators, and then our representatives do as well. Now, when this first happened to me, we had Amy Klobuchar and Franken as our U.S. senators. Brought to you by the state who elected Jesse Ventura as the governor. Okay, so I don't know who Minnesota plans to elect to public office next. Maybe Mickey Mouse or someone else they see on television. That seems to be where they get their idea of how the world works. I saw it on the TV. So, here's a quote from Henry Adams. You can't use tact with a congressman. A congressman is a hog. You must take a stick and hit him on the snout. Well, that's what I'm going to do in this video. Because one of the reasons I am in this car is because the office of U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar didn't care whether I lived or died. And if you think she cares whether you or your family live or die, let alone prosper, let alone avoid having the fruits of your labor taxed to be spent on whatever nonsense they want to spend your money on, you better listen to what I'm saying here. I've had one direct encounter with Amy Klobuchar. The thing that made me homeless, of course, was my neighbors. Breaking the law, breaking our lease, violating every law of human decency. And then nobody in the state of Minnesota would do their job that they accept paychecks for doing. They accept the paycheck. They take the money from my taxes and your taxes. They take that money. They stick it in their pocket and they go buy a cabin somewhere. Like next to this, look at the video I recently did on that girl who was kidnapped and kept in that cabin up in Wisconsin. That's the area where people like Amy Klobuchar have their cabins. Those are the kinds of people who are out there. They take the money, but they refuse to do their job. The police. There's an ordinance on file. There's an ordinance passed about noise ordinance, but they refuse to enforce it for me. They would do it for other people, because that's what Minnesotans do. It's a cult. They take care of their own, and everyone else is an outsider, and just as surely as Scientology, an outsider, not only do they not care if they live or die, but they would much prefer that they at least went away. And if you think a Minnesotan, of all people, can be the leader of the free world, let alone the leader of this country, and care about everyone in this country, then you haven't been watching my videos to learn what Minnesotans are like. My encounter with Amy Klobuchar, again, it was my neighbors and every government official from my landlord to the city council all the way up to the governor's office, Mark Dayton, who refused to do anything. They wouldn't even listen. I mean, they're so lazy they don't even sit there and listen and then promise you they'll do something and do nothing. They don't even do that. They just take the paycheck. Unless I can corner them somewhere, and then they sit there and they put on that, oh yeah, you betcha, that fake Minnesota nice smile of theirs. While they hold the knife behind their back, you can't trust a word these people say. Unlike any place else I've been. There's individuals like that, but you don't have a culture that is built around it, except in a cult. Like Scientology, something like that, Jim Jones, which is why I call Minnesota a cult. And I've only studied culthood since the late 1980s, so what do I know about that? It's only been about 30 years. Amy Klobuchar's office did nothing as well, didn't even respond. The encounter I had with Amy Klobuchar. At the job I was at, the professional job I was at, when these neighbors were ruining my home life. They made my home life a living hell by torturing and tormenting me inside my own home, where no official cared about. At the same time, the company I was working for had some bad leadership, and they replaced the leadership with even worse leadership. Okay? One of the things that happened was Amy Klobuchar, as a senator, and Al Franken did this as well, came in to meet with our executive staff and then speak to the grunt workers at the company. Now, when she did that, she was accompanied by an entourage of young men who were all dressed in black suits, and I mean, these were black. They were like coal. And from what I could tell, that pretty well described their hearts and souls as well. It was scary. These were not Secret Service. This was not a guard. These were a bunch of interns. And at public expense, this entourage that's probably larger than the Rolling Stones has is following Amy Klobuchar around. So she goes and she speaks to our executives, and they talk about whatever they're talking about. Of course, our executives are going to make their points, try to get legislation passed that benefits the company, increase the stock value, etc., etc. Then she comes out and she speaks to the employees. So we stop working, we stop being productive to go sit in chairs and watch this woman up at a podium speak to us. Okay, now was it worth the trade-off? That lack of productivity there while we sat and watched her, was it worth it? Well, let's find out. And this was true for her and for Al Franken. Well, Al Franken was a bumbling fool. Al Franken was so embarrassing, I almost left the talk. My skin was crawling watching the guy. He was bumbling and fumbling. He was trying so hard to repeat what he had just heard from the executives because he knew nothing about our industry. He knew nothing about anything. And he was struggling so hard to remember the terminology he had just heard. And everything that came out of his mouth just sounded like a computer program had written it. It was horrible. It was embarrassing.
My job, Amy's job, is to be a partner with you to make sure that the regulatory process is run in the best way, obviously, but also to make sure protect them in two ways: make sure that all the devices that get to them are safe, but also make sure that the most advanced devices get to them expeditiously. So there's always a balance there, and
Klobuchar is much, much smoother than that. So she was able to do the same thing, but she was able to pull it off. She has a lot of experience doing that. She's a career politician. She was prosecutor there in Minneapolis, I believe, before she became senator. So she knows how to talk in front of a crowd. When they got done, they had questions. Now, we're in our workplace, and all the executives are standing around the sides watching the grunt workers in the middle. And we're supposed to ask her questions. Now, if we ask her a hardball question, that puts her on the spot, makes her uncomfortable. What's that going to do for her desire to help the company that we're in? In other words, to protect our jobs, we can't ask her a hardball question. It's impossible. If we ask her a hardball question, the executives are going to start taking down names. So we have to ask stupid softball questions instead. I sat back and watched to see what would happen. The people up front were a bunch of sycophants, just like these black-suited interns. And they're just sitting there, "Oh my gosh, I saw her on the TV. Oh, I'm seeing her in real life." It was like a pop music concert or something. They're just almost drooling, just, "Oh my gosh, this is someone I saw on TV." They know nothing about this woman at all. They saw her on the TV. Someone asked a question. It wasn't a hardball question, but it approached it. It could have been if she had been sincere to answer the question the way it should have. And I'm sorry, I don't remember what the question was. But they asked her something about, legislation in Washington or something not related directly to work, but her capacity as a U.S. Senator. She spent about 6 seconds answering that question, just getting started, basically repeating the question. And then she definitely, better than Al Franken of all things. Al Franken was a performer officially. He was an official performer, but she's a better performer. She took the conversation and she like repeated the question and then immediately geared it off into some comedy routine. And she starts telling a story about her and her husband going to the grocery store. And everything she said, it sounds like it's unrehearsed, but I'm good at seeing how people work like that. I've been studying these kinds of people for years. This was well rehearsed for her. But she's really smooth, like any Minnesotan. Minnesotans cannot be trusted when they open their mouths. They put on a false vision, a false image of who they are. You never know who you're dealing with a Minnesotan. And she starts telling jokes, and everyone starts chuckling at these jokes. And she never answered the question. By the time she had finished with this complete total diversion, everyone forgot what the original question was. It didn't matter that she didn't answer it. Let me see there. I think I had a quote here. Let's see. John Adams, one of the American founders, said, "Abuse of words has been the great instrument of sophistry and chicanery, of party, faction, and division of society." Abuse of words, abuse of the language, political correctness, people who manipulate language, which is what she did. She took a question and instead of answering it directly like a responsible leader would do, she took it and just diverted it off to nowhere land, and it disappeared into the ether. No one ever got an answer to that question, and that wasn't even a hardball question. Now, why was she speaking to us that day if she had no intention of actually talking about anything meaningful, or if it was a place where we could not ask her good, hard questions? Because she was campaigning. She was campaigning. See, what they do is they go to all these companies, they speak to the executives, exchange the briefcase of cash or whatever they're going to do there, whatever. I'm not even going to comment on that. But then they go out and they speak to the people working there. Now, to the people working there who don't really do a lot of thinking, they do a lot of watching television, but they don't do a whole lot of thinking. They think this person's here to see them, and because they care about them. What they're doing is you have your odds of being elected skyrocket the moment a person makes personal contact with you. Even if you drive by in a limousine and through the bulletproof glass you can kind of see the shadow of someone waving and it kind of looks like you, that person will be more inclined to vote for you because it's now personalized. They feel like they've met you, like they've seen you, like they've been close to you. It makes no rational sense whatsoever. The reason, when these people are campaigning, you wonder why they go out and do all this stuff. Well, it's because the more they're seen, the more familiar they become to the masses that they're standing in front of. That's how you get reelected. So throughout her term in office, throughout her 6 years as a senator, she comes back to Minnesota, doesn't live here anymore, lives in Washington, comes back to Minnesota, and she goes, talks to these businesses, does whatever they're doing behind closed doors, and then she comes out in front of 50, 100, 200 employees, and she gives her little speech, and then if anyone dares to ask a hardball question, she just veers it off to the side and replaces it with humor. And how are you going to like somebody better than someone who makes you laugh? Even though the person in front of you is not a professional comedian, this is somebody who should be sober and serious, and if you ask them a serious question, they should be answering it seriously, not diverting the question off into joke land, which is what she did. And she was so good at it. She was so good at it, I just sat back and marveled. I never asked her, I wasn't going to ask her a question. She knew what she was doing. She was a master of it. And I had already dealt with Minnesotans for about 8 years at that point. So I knew how good they were at projecting a false image, how good they were at presenting the image of a person who they are not. They're not even close to that. That's what Minnesotans do. That's what a cult does. That's how you suck people into your cult. You don't go out there The Manson family didn't go out to people and say, we're members of a cult who like to cut up pregnant women and do a lot of drugs and have sex with each other, and our leader's this crazed maniac. How would you like to join us? That's not the way it works. What happens is you come in there, you sit down with Manson, and Manson, who was another master of this kind of thing, just like Klobuchar, for a moment behaves like a human being. And if you've ever seen interviews with him, he knows how to do it when he needs to. He knows how. Well, he's dead now, but he knew how. And he slowly draws you in. He finds your weakness. He asks you questions. He finds your weakness, and he addresses those, and he makes it feel like he cares about you. And then slowly, as the crazy enters in, you don't even notice the transition from what you saw the first time. If you sat down with L. Ron Hubbard, he's not going to start talking about this ridiculous nonsense in the stars. He's going to start talking about Dianetics and make it sound like it's scientific, which it surely is not. You're not going to have the foggiest idea what Scientology is until you're so far immersed in it that you can't get out of it anymore. Your mind's already been twisted and brainwashed. That's what Klobuchar was doing to these people, right in front of my eyes, and I had to sit there and just take it. If I had been at a public venue, I would have challenged that woman. I would have stood up, I probably got thrown out, maybe even got jailed, just for asking questions. But she wasn't going to let anybody ask questions. She had an army of these interns with their black suits to intimidate everybody in the first place. She had our bosses standing around making sure, with clipboards, making sure that we don't even do anything to make her feel uncomfortable, or our job is at risk. And meanwhile, while she makes it look like she's there to talk to us because she cares, what she's actually doing is campaigning. And the public's paying for it. Because the public's paying for her to make a trip supposedly to see what our industry needed as a U.S. senator. But it wasn't. She was turning it into a campaign opportunity at the public expense. That is sleazy. Franken did the same thing, but Franken was such a putz he couldn't even pull it off. He just looked like a complete buffoon. She was smooth as silk, which is what a traditional Minnesotan will be. Oh yeah, you betcha. She had the big old smile on her face the whole time. I mean, the world's burning in flames the whole time outside. 10,000 homeless people surrounding her, and she's in there. Oh yeah, you betcha. My husband and I went to the grocery store, and yada, yada, yada. If you're not familiar with Machiavelli, you might want to look into it a bit. Machiavelli wrote a book called The Prince. It was basically a manual for how to manipulate people politically. Kind of like, Sun Tzu, The Art of War. That's for war. All warfare is based on deception. Winning difficult battles like a political campaign is based on deception. Machiavelli was more for the political side of that. And his whole book is filled with the tactics and techniques of how, if you want to take control politically over a business, a corporation, a government, a world, here's what you do to manipulate the masses. Klobuchar looked like she read that book from cover to cover every single day. She was so smooth at what she did. And I'll be honest with you, before I saw her there, I had no opinion of her. I had no opinion of her beyond, I had not yet contacted her regarding my issue. I think the only thing I knew about her is what she had done is, okay, I did have an opinion of her. I'm gonna qualify this. Since she had been the Minnesota prosecutor, what she did there was horrifically. I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole nother battle. She did something there that played into the hands of the world's most powerful hate group right now. And she's still in their hands, in the palm of their hands. But that's a whole nother story. And the wealthiest hate group, by the way. The most profitable hate group on the face of planet Earth. Wow. This whole thing with Trump being elected has the Democrats scrambling because they're realizing that the people they've been putting out there they're pretty transparent. You can see how radical, how ridiculous they are. Anyone who at the beginning of the 21st century goes out there and says, I want to repeat what we did in the 20th century. I want to repeat the Soviet Union. It was a complete failure. It probably caused more human suffering per capita than any other experiment in anything ever in all of human history. But we want to repeat it here in the United States of America because we'll do it right. Trotsky and Lenin, they didn't know what they were doing. Stalin, they were crazy, but we know what we're doing. That's what this Cortez and Bernie Sanders and people like that, Pelosi, that's what these people think. All right, anyone who doesn't learn from history enough to want to repeat it that quickly is suicidal. You can't put those people up against a Trump. He's had too many successes. So what are they doing? They're scrambling and looking for someone who is good at hiding who they are, which Bernie Sanders isn't. Cortez isn't. Cortez can't form a sentence properly. Like, oh my God, like, I totally, like the green, it's the trees, I mean, I don't know how, New York, shame on you. My opinion of New York, just when she got elected, she can't even form a sentence. She's not even literate. Like, oh my God, totally. Like this woman was raised by a television set, right? This Cortez, raised by a television set, and they elect her to public office. What the Democrats need is somebody who looks like one thing, but is what they want her to be, or him. You're not going to find a better example of that than a Minnesotan, because that's exactly what the cult of Minnesota is. That's what Minnesota nice is. Minnesota nice is the big smile, the outstretched hand to shake your hand with the knife behind their back. That's what Minnesota nice is. These people are ruthless. If you're not part of their group, part of their family, part of their circle of friends, part of their business interests, you're as good as dead. And if you don't believe me, then step from behind the camera and look at the car I'm living in for 4 years. Well, I work for a living. Look at my videos where the Minnesota Department of Health just threw those homeless people out of that hotel into this cold, freezing, polar vortex weather. The week before Christmas. The week before Christmas. While publicly they go out with their suits and their smiles, their oh yeah, you betchas, and they claim that they're saving children. By shutting down a hotel that was a threat to not one single person on the face of the earth. But what they did to those other people is a clear and present danger to their existence. It's an existential threat to them, to me. Those are the kinds of people that Klobuchar represents. This isn't about her politics. Democrats, go ahead, put the very best person you've got up against Trump. Do it. We want the best person in office. Frankly, I could care less if they're Democrat or Republican. But if you're going to pull Machiavellian tricks, like putting someone with one face in front of the camera, running her for president, when her real face is something completely different, that is beyond sleazy, and that is beyond desperate. If you don't have anyone better than that, then you might as well just not run in the election at all. Don't even enter a candidate for president. If you can't do better than a Machiavellian Minnesotan senator, don't even bother entering a horse in that race. Here's another quote I ran across from Dean Acheson. The first requirement of a statesman is that he is dull. That is not always easy to achieve. Trump was an outsider. He won. He's anything but dull. You got to give him that. I think anyone has to give him that. He's anything but dull. Whether you like him, whether you hate him, whatever. He's anything but dull. He's his own guy. He does things his way. Klobuchar is dull. Dull as any Minnesotan. I've said it on these videos. In a decade of living here, I haven't been able to carry on an intelligent conversation because these people don't know anything. They don't talk about anything. Klobuchar brings it way back down, dumbs it down to the level of the masses to tell you funny little stories so that you'll forget all about what you originally asked her, so that she could never, ever be held publicly accountable for any decisions she makes. And the decisions that she makes as U.S. Senator already affect you, no matter where you live. Even if you're in another country, she has enough power already to affect your life. And if she becomes President of the United States, she can take over your life. And if you don't know what that means, then don't just believe me. Start doing some research on the internet about what Minnesotans are really like. Start looking up searches on transplants in Minnesota. People who have moved to Minnesota from a normal place. And look at what you get. You're going to find forum after blog of people saying exactly what I'm saying about the way these Minnesotans are. These people cannot be trusted. They are beyond evil. If you're one of them, it's like the mafia. If you're one of them, they'll protect you with everything they got. If you're not one of them, you can die. They don't care. But they'll always, always pretend to care. And that's the difference. I don't think Manson ever made it more clear than he did when he made his contempt for the leadership of America, the white-collar shirts who run America. I think he made his contempt for them quite clear. If nothing else, Manson was honest to that extent. But not Minnesotans. If they hate your guts, they're going to treat you wonderfully. They're going to suck you in, they're going to gather information about you, and then they're going to take it and use it against you. And they're going to hurt you. You people have no idea what just happened when someone like a Klobuchar says she's thinking of running for president. You have no idea what kind of threat this country comes under with that. I would rather have someone like Cortez or Sanders again run for president. Because at least you know what you got. Cortez can't form a sentence. If she tries, she'd have to go back to school, grade school, to figure out how to talk normally. Sanders, you just look at Sanders, you can tell just everything comes out of his mouth makes no sense. And another comment regarding her, shall we say, interactions with this hate group, the most profitable industry on the face of the earth. Here's a quote from Aesop, from the fable fame. Things that children are supposed to understand. We hang the petty thieves and appoint the great thieves to public office. When she was still a prosecutor in the Twin Cities, before she was a senator, she was serving, like an assassin serves the mafia. She was serving this hate group, helping them to bring in more money, which is all stolen from us. And the thing is, they're so successful at it. They're so successful at lying. Once you've taken over the media, unless people think or do any research on their own, they're at the mercy of what they heard in the media. So I can't even tell you what I'm talking about because you have been brainwashed by it already. Period. You have been. And there's nothing I can do about it. They've won that battle, thanks to people like Klobuchar. And that's our future as a nation and as a world if that woman gets anywhere near the White House. She shouldn't be allowed to use the bathroom in the White House. This is where Jefferson and Washington, Lincoln, Adams, Jackson, these people ran the country out of the White House. And there's even a thought of putting a Minnesotan in there? 4 years, all this effort I've made contacting every Minnesota government agency possible, including Klobuchar's office and Franken's, throughout, And I'm still living in a car. Nothing. Nothing. They have done nothing. They haven't even listened to what I said. Don't even respond. They just accept their paycheck. Paid for by people who work for a living, like me. Who, again, is living in this car in minus 25-degree weather. And she has the audacity to say that she's qualified to serve as the President of the United States, the leader of the free world. Here's a quote, and I have not been able to confirm this quote, so keep that in mind. Supposedly from Senator Henry Ashurst, a Democrat from Arizona, who said, "When I have to choose between voting for the people or the special interests, I always stick with the special interests. They remember. The people forget." That is exactly what Klobuchar does. The masses are a subspecies to her. That's why she doesn't need to respond to someone living in a car in this cold. That's why an office like hers doesn't need to put reins, a muzzle on the Minnesota Department of Health, who is out there off camera putting people's lives at risk while claiming to care about human health. That hate group I told you about is the most powerful special interest probably in the world today. And because of people like her, they are now the wealthiest one. And they have spread their disease into more aspects of your life than you will ever know. You see, when you view the people you represent as just the masses, just the rabble, the dregs of humanity, it doesn't matter if they live or die, that's how you become a Stalin, where you create a famine to kill off 50 million of your own people. And you don't care. You still sleep like a baby at night. Because they don't matter. They're not human, right? They're something less than human. That's how you receive messages from someone who's suffering and freezing and suffering through injustice and not getting their money's worth from their taxes from your own jurisdiction that you represent, and you just ignore it. You don't even respond. That's when you think that someone like me is less than human. I'm not worthy. I don't know who she represents then. It must be that 1% who are human beings in her eyes. But that's Minnesotans, isn't it? She claims, comes across with the, "Oh yeah, you betcha," the little jokes. You know, a sense of humor is one thing. A sense of humor can be a wonderful, great thing, but it can also be a weapon. It can be a weapon. Abuse of words has been the great instrument of sophistry and chicanery, of party, of faction, and division of society, said John Adams. Abuse of words. Humor can be an abuse of words. It was inappropriate for her to be sitting there putting on a comedy show when someone asked her a good, fair question about what she's doing as a U.S. Senator. But the people forget. I'm sorry, it is so cold here. I'm going to have to turn off this camera and get some heat if I can. Amy Klobuchar for president? You better think and do some research before you vote on that one, alright? Please. Not for me, but for yourself and for your own children's sake. Learn who Amy Klobuchar is. Learn what Minnesota nice is. And I'm just going to say it anyway. Because the idea of her running for president is worse than seeing a train wreck. This is like watching the Twin Towers fall right in front of your eyes. If Amy Klobuchar is running for president of the United States, then may God help us all. Thanks for watching.